Today I'm speaking with Mr. Raphie Howard at his home in Willow Tree.
Howard at his home at Willow Tree. Good morning, Raph.
Morning, Phil.
It is good to be here talking with you today. I've known you all my life and my memories go back over 60 years when you ran the mail run from Willow Tree to Glaston. How long have you lived in the Willow Tree district?
Well, I've lived in Willow Tree district probably all my life, I suppose, but I came to Willow Tree here in 1927. I took a subcontract for the Willow Tree Glaston mail from Fred Bernard, and we're still, after all these years, we're still running the same mail with all the other end, the Glen Oak and added onto it, as well as all the Blackville area. And through this year we've had a pretty rough time because the whole lot of it's been mostly underwater and the roads around Blackville have been nearly impassable for most of the time, but we still get there.
This will be one of the wettest years you've ever experienced, I'd take.
It's the wettest in this part of the year because it's been on and off all the year, you might say. It's really no sooner starts to dry up a bit and then down it'll come again, and it wouldn't only rain a few points, it'll rain inches.
That's right. And you'd be one of the oldest residents and would have been doing business with the people of this district longer than perhaps anyone else.
Well, yes, I think I would be. There's another old resident in Willow Tree now, Fred Benham, and I think that probably Bill Redmond would be the other two older, old residents here. But yes, I've done business with the Willow Tree people and the Willow Tree district for all of those years, and we still are. And when I came here, where Fred Bernard was in the process of converting the mail from horses and buggies and pack horses to motor vehicles. When I think back over some of the motor vehicles we had, they'd be worth $1 million today, which never dawned on you then. But anyhow, I used horses quite a bit in the first part of it, and eventually it became motorised all round. But while we motorised the business, we motorised everything else as well. The carting of rural produce, such as wool, wheat, and anything that they needed. And I started here then, the truck that I started with then was a 1925 model Graham Dodge. Yes. And it was second hand, but anyhow I battled on with it and we got to be able to come better trucks then as the time went on. And it gives me a bit of a lift today when I look at the trucks that Les has got, the Howard Haulage fella. He's the fellow with all the money. It's a spin-off of what I started all those years ago.
Yes, you kicked it off.
Yep.
Yes, and where did you go to school and how many years schooling did you have, Ray, to prepare you for all this?
Well, I had very little schooling. You could probably say that about 2.5 years was all the schooling that I ever had. But my mother was a school teacher before she was married, and she taught me most of what I know, but we had a private tutor at Glaston there for 12 months. Well, I reckon he didn't teach me anything. I reckon he was a dead loss. But I went to the Aberdeen Convent boarding school for 2 years, or 18 months, yes. And that it was good too, but other than that, nothing.
Yeah. Can you remember any of your teachers' names after all these years?
Oh yes, they were very good. Those sisters at the Aberdeen Convent, they were mighty. There's no doubt about it. They did everything for those kids. There was an old sister that used to teach me, Sister Patrick, and there was a Sister Josephine. Sister Marcellinus, and several others, I could probably think of them all, but just offhand, those are three that come to mind because they were really good to the kids.
They must have been really good.
Oh, yeah.
And what was your first job, right?
Well, when you start to talk about this, it makes me a bit tied up because I came to Glaston. My grandfather was the manager of Brindley Park for the Beddington family for 40 odd years, and he bought Glaston and moved over the range in around about the 1900 or somewhere there. Yes. Well, I was born in Crindai, but my father then went to the Merriwa side too for 3 years, and then he came to Glaston. So I came to Glaston when I was 3 years old, and I grew up there. Well, I was one of the elder one of the second generation. I couldn't do much about the place, but all of my uncles were well-educated, smart men, but they drank themselves out of everything they had, And I could see it even then, and I got out of it. I left home before I was 17, and I worked in shearing sheds and station hands, and I went to Glenmahon when the Moses first moved from Arrowfield to Glenmahon. I worked there for a while, but then I was at different other jobs around. I worked at Chippendale for Perth Benham, St Elmo, when the Dr Harbison was there. And I was about 7 or 8 months with the Graziers Shearing Cooperative Company. That was good experience. But Glenmahon was the main part of it. There was an overseer there named Tom Bauer. Very sarcastic, hard fellow he was. But if you were interested to learn, he was interested enough to teach you a bit. What I learned for him then when I came to Willow Tree and started the stock carrying business, which I pioneered in this district, I brought the first semi-trailer in here in 1934. And then we finished up with 4 or 5 transports, and we had all of it in the finish, Warra and Windy and Kickable and most of Nundle,
Yes.
and all Millers Creek and all the other smaller cockies as well, so we were full-time. All the stock at that time was loaded at Willow Tree. It was one of the biggest trucking centres in New South Wales.
Yeah, that's right, I remember that.
Everything was trucked to Flemington. They trucked here on Wednesday and Saturday. Trains used to leave there, and I've got an old picture somewhere of the trucks and the train. At this particular morning, there were 36 trucks of stock loaded here at Willow Tree, and we carted 27 of them.
Very good.
We'd start on Tuesday morning, and you'd go all Tuesday and Tuesday night to get them, and then the same on Saturday. You'd start on Friday and go Friday night, and that's the way it was.
Yeah. Well, I first remember you on day and coming back to deliver the outgoing mail, that's collecting it from the boxes, back to Willow Tree Post Office on the other day, and that was back in the late 20s, I suppose.
Yes, in 1927 it was when I started first, yes, and we went on, I ran it all the way then, right up until, up into the, I run the mail right up into the time that I started with on the buses, you see. They started in 1948, but I didn't actually start that bus run. It was started by Cecil Carter.
Yes, that's
And
right.
it was started with a Fargo truck,
Yes.
covered with a tarpaulin, and then he traded that in and he bought a second-hand ex-army bus, an International K5.
Yeah.
Well then, he kept that for about 12 months or so, I think, and he traded it in on a new GMC, a 33-passenger proppers body GMC.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't handle the kids and he couldn't handle the people, so that's how I come to buy over that, and that's when I started in the bus services. That was in the early 1950s. So the buses now today, I went on and on and on with them, and they've grown now. Ponce's and Kathy, they run the bus services now, and they've got 23 buses today.
Yes, that's a big lot. You told me about using the pack horses to finish the run. How many did it take to do this job? You'd have to have a fair...
Horses?
Horses, yes.
Right, about 10 or a dozen.
Yes, yes.
I've still got them. I've still got horses everywhere. They're all over the place. Some in Queensland, some in Victoria, and all over New South Wales. And at the present time, there's 42 at Boxhurst.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. And what time did you have to start in the morning, and then what time did you finish when in those early days?
Well, at that time, and this is a big thing today too now, Fred Bernard and I would go down to the railway and collect eggs, get nothing for that.
Yeah.
Take them up. Tom Adams was the post office master at the time.
Yes.
Go in and open the bags and sort all the mail. If any of the union fellas walked in on this, I don't know what they do today, but we used to sort all the mail, and even I used to sort even the registered articles and sign the registered slips, T.W. Adams, and put them on a file.
Yeah.
And then we'd sort the mail, and at that time there were 40-odd private mail bags, and there were 3 or 4 country post offices at that time. I think one at Warra Creek, and one at Glaston, one at Jacks Creek, I think. And Millers Creek, you might say, was a post office because it was at that time when they had a store there. It was all the people around the place used to buy their goods there, irrespective. They never bothered about coming to the general stores. They got them from the Millers Creek stores, most of it. So to leave here. By the time you sorted the mail and got it ready and then got all your parcels and goods and everything else, it would sometimes be 10:30 or 11 o'clock by the time you'd leave Willow Tree, and I'd leave here sometimes with 2 or 3 ton of stuff.
Yes.
At that time the mail was only a sideline.
Yes.
It was just held to run together, that's
Yes.
all.
Yes. And who else had mail runs at that time if you went up north?
Well, when I first started, the Werra Creek Mail was run by Mr. Bill Meredith,
Yes.
with a horse and sulky. And then I think there were several others. I can't remember all of them, but I know Tom Green, he had mail runs here. And then I think, I'm not sure who had those mail runs from then on, but it was nearly all, some of the Willow Tree people anyhow.
Yes.
Jimmy Clark, I think, when he came here.
Yes,
I
later
think,
years.
his father was the manager of the old store for Roundtrees at that time, and Jim used to run a mail, him and Eric Green, I think. They run it in later times.
And in the very early days, was it your uncle Charlie Howard? Did he have a run?
Charlie Howard, it was him that really first started what I started. He came in with Fred Bernard in 1926 or around that time, and he bought a Graham Dodge truck, and they were, as I say, in the process of converting it from horses to pack horse. But Charlie Howard, I had a lot of time for him. He was very good to me, old Charlie, but he had the same phone as all the other Howards. He used to grog up now and again too. But he was very good to me, and it came to the time when we started to move goods and things like that, he was crippled. They couldn't handle it, so I just took over his contract, his subcontract from Fred Bernard. Actually, it was him that started it. Charlie Howard, yes. And then he did work, he was here on and off for quite a while. He ran the mail for me quite a few times.
And what means of transport did most of the people out in around those creeks have in those early days? Many of them have cars, or most of them rely on...
Well, yes,
sulky?
in those times, you see, cars they were in the early stages, but I often reckon some of those cars that you bought then around about the 1920-30 models had more guts than some of the cars today.
Yes.
And they were certainly heavier material and all that, but my father, before he left Glaston, had a Model 91 Overland, and I think it was somewhere around about 25 or 6 model or somewhere there. I just can't remember, and I got a picture of it somewhere. But the cars that Alfred Bernard and I had, Lord heavens above, we had about 6 or 7 T-model Fords, and we had 2 4-cylinder automobiles, gate chains outside the door, and we had another half a dozen or more Buicks around about that time. And one of the nicest cars, and I've only ever seen one of them, and he had it for a little while and sold it to. He bought it from somewhere over Nundle way, I think, a Channard Walker. Great big brass, beautiful car it was. And he had that for a little while, but his pride and joy that. But I can't remember what, but somewhere in Sydney somebody got it in the time. And so in those times the people of the districts had T-model Fords or, early GM models of some sort. I remember at Willis Creek, McDonald's Creek rather, Arnold Martin had an Oakland. And Nelson Civil, I think, had a Rugby. So they were all, older models that you don't hear of today.
No, you don't hear them today.
But Oakland, I think, was Continental, printed by the Packard Company. And the others, Oakland and Oldsmobile and those, they were General Motors.
That's right, Did you see the 2 T-model Fords going through yesterday?
I did. One of them exactly the same as one of those.
Well, let's see the T-model Ford.
As a matter of fact, I bought one of them for £8, one of the T-model Fords.
Well, they still survived, haven't they?
They did.
The T-models, they can still rejuvenate them to run through. Where they were going, I wouldn't know. I think you told me the size and make of your first motor vehicle earlier on, did you? Or it's the first motor vehicle that you had on your run? I think
the first motor vehicle I had was a Graham Dodge 3000 truck, a 1925 model here. And then I did buy a Chev car, a new one, a 1927 Capital model Chev, brand new for £195. That year I had that car. We used to use that on the mail too. But from then on we had, got into heavier trucks and then when I started to do the stock work, of course I had a semi-trailer. I brought the first semi-one, as I said, in here on a Fargo truck.
Yeah.
And then over the years I had 7 of those Fargos. Well, they were Chrysler built,
Yeah.
Chrysler motors, the
Yeah.
same as the Dodge.
Yeah.
Chrysler took over Dodge about the 1927 or 8 or somewhere there.
And we've talked about your pack horses, but is there anything you'd like to say about any incidents or anything like that
Oh,
about
God.
pack horses, experiences you had in the day's work?
There was plenty of instances. Plenty of instances, heavens above. As I say, that grey horse that I got from your father, as a matter of fact, he was a fellow that in the flood times that used to swim all the creeks for me, but there were others there.
Yeah.
I did try it a couple of times there to lead a pack horse along with him too, and I got over, but I'll tell you what, we only just made it, and I wouldn't have that on again. So that is the way it was. If I couldn't get across the creek with that grey horse, I just didn't get across
You
at
didn't
all.
get across.
So that's the way it was, and there wasn't many days that we didn't deliver the mail. As in those times, it went out on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yes.
Come back on the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. No, wait a minute, that's wrong too. Went out on the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and come back on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's the way it was, and you're all the weekend in the bush. So all the weekends I was in the bush at Glaston, I shot horses all the weekend then for $5 a head, 50 cents a head, $5 sometimes. And they found the shoes and the nails, and I'll tell you what, there were some buggered horses in it too, by God. But I nearly always got them shod, one way or the other.
Yeah. And in those days, of course, you had Warra Creek, Jack's Creek, Miller. Every creek wasn't bridged.
No, there were no bridges.
You had every obstacle under the sun, didn't you?
There wasn't even any roads at that time, and that's why I say I handed it to the Shire at that time, Warra Shire, because what they did, they gravelled the worst parts of the road, you know, and where there was a bit of solid material, like, for instance, past where the Jacks Creek School was. See, that was a bit up, and it was a bit hard, so you skid and slid and you got across there all right, and then where the plains were, they gravelled them. But it went on. I remember Tom Tucker, he did a lot of contract work for the Murrurundi. Well, he had A-model Ford trucks, tippers, and I think they were probably some of the first tippers that come about here. There were no hydraulic hoists, you just wound them up. And he did a lot of it was creek gravel though, big stones and rough as anything, but at least it was something you could travel on, you could get there.
That's right.
And that happened, but I can report one instance as far as black mud's concerned. Old Fred Bernard were coming in with 2 loads of Glenmullen wool. Well, it rained when we went out, and it was still raining when we were coming back. And along there underneath where Paralina mailbox is today, there was a bit of a swampy place. Got stuck, both of them there. Well, there were single-wheeled trucks in those times. We had trace chains wound around the wheels to get through. Anyhow, we couldn't get through there, so he just got an old, I reckon, lamp, and he walked all around the truck, and he, God, yes, Raphie, he said, we are going to be here all night with nothing to eat. So in the morning, he got up, and he had a sort of a brake drum we used to fit onto the back wheel, and he cut a couple of wires out of the fence and hooked them onto a tree behind. By gee, he wound the 2 of the trucks out. And weren't we battling then to get to the top man crane, but we got there.
You got there, And in those days, you'd have had, there'd be a few bullock teams about, and a lot of horse teams, wagons and that to tear up make the road even worse.
Yes, when you mention bullock teams and horse teams, now that brings to mind one of the highlights, I'd say, of my early times when I worked at Glenmullen. You did everything with horses, everything with draft horses, and they had oodles of them. So Bob Boyle was the main team driver there, and I used to be his horse sider most of the time. And one day he said to me, we need another team here. And he said, I think you could drive it. I said, I'm damn sure I could. So I went to the trouble then of picking me horses, and I said, I picked out 17. I used to have 2 in the shafts of the wagon and then 5 throughs. Now, it brings back memories now when I see these brewery horses, those big, beautiful Clydesdales they've got. Well, now in that team of 17 that I had at Glenmullen, I had 10 of those big, bally Clydesdales. When you milk them bullock teams, it brings back a memory of something that was a highlight. Those times you were always drawing pine poles from the windy scrubs. There was hundreds of thousands of them. So they used to do creek crossings with them and sheep yards, and they used to do 101 jobs with these pine poles. So they made some sort of a deal with Windy, where the station hand Windy cut the pine poles and drew them all out, and we had to go then and draw them. Well, the two Glenmount horse teams were there. There were two bullock teams there, and there was another horse team from way out the plain somewhere. I'm not too sure now, but one of these old bullock drivers was on to me all the time. We were having lunch there, and he said, "Look at this," he said. "Kid here," he said, "not drive behind you, he's driving the bloody horse team." But anyhow, it was a bit that sort of country, you know, when you break through the top of it, you're really stuck. So one of the Glenmount teams, Randy Boyle, went first, and this old bullock fella, and he had a team of beautiful bullocks. Oh God, you could run a rule over them, you know. He had 14 big red bullocks, beautiful team of bullocks they were. Anyhow, this happened. On the way out, his front wheel slid into a stump hole, and the tail wagon was nearly tipped down, and he swung those bullocks from one side to the other in every way, and he couldn't get out. So I said to him, "Mate," I said, I'll have to try and hook the horses onto here somehow or other." "Well, that's a real insult, talking about hooking horses onto bullocks. Can't do that."
Would be too.
And now all the other drivers come, and they rigged up chains here and there, so I took the 15 off the front and brought them down. I said to him, "Now, you wind those bullocks up," because I said, "when I speak, every one of these horses will hit the collar." So we got them all chained up and ready to go, and we got the yokes buried into the bullocks' necks. Well, that's how I wanted them. So I just said, "Go to the horses," and down they went, and out come his wagon. So I had to swing them a little bit then to just stop them again, and I took them off. Well, from then on, I was his best mate then. "Oh, good young fella, it's a good team of horses you've got." I said, "Yeah," and I didn't do it by flogging them.
No, that's right. Well, getting on a bit further, horse teams. Bill Cooper was one of the main ones out that way, wasn't he? He used to bring
Yes,
all in from
I remember Bill Cooper very well. Well, of course, at that time that I'm talking about, he was one of the main carriers, I'd say, in the district. He did a lot of work with his horse team. I'd say he did most of the general work for nearly everybody on the way, and he had done it for years. Well, his stronghold was up McDonald's Creek. Even when I had the trucks there, I couldn't get there not for a long time. Bill Cooper, you know, I suppose just because he'd done it so long, we owe several people stuck to him. But in the finish up, I did get it. Well, the years caught up to old Bill too, I suppose, and he gradually got out of it. But his wagon was on display in Murrurundi for a lot of years, and I don't think it still could be there.
Yes, it's still there.
Yes, it still could be there, but yes, I knew him well. I was good enough mates with old Bill Cooper.
Yes.
Some of the younger Coopers, I've known them too. Ben Cooper, I remember we did a fair bit with him too.
Yes. And you didn't go into Warra Station, did you, in your mail run?
No, we didn't do Warra, and we still don't do Warra, believe it or not.
Oh.
No, it's a sort of a private turnout thing. I don't know what it is.
With all those different owners since the AA company had it?
Those Mahanes, I think. Well, now, I think it's part of Stan Seymour's mail run. Now, he does the Warra Creek, Jacks Creek, and Baramble Creek.
I see,
and I think on his way back, he does Warra.
Yeah, I see. We got to go along a little further. We've talked about getting through flooded creeks and things like that, and I think it'd be a bit of a job keeping the mail and bread dry in those days, you know, beating rain, and you didn't have a...
Well, it was too, but at that time, it wasn't as big a job as what you think, because the mail bags were always then in real heavy canvas bags. Well, I used to use one of them pack bags all the time, but then in the wet season, any of the parcels that we had, well, you could only limit that, you know, it had to be restricted for when you had to use pack horses and to get over creeks and that. So I used to try and take the main things to the people, and I'd roll them up in a real waterproof mail bag, put it inside the other bag, and most times we kept them pretty dry. But all the mail, I was always particular about because at that time, as I say, there were 40-odd private bags. Well, they weren't so bad, but any of the loose mail, you had to make sure that was rolled up pretty right, otherwise the water would get to it. But we nearly always got it there all right.
Yes. And I remember when I was a kid, you were the link between Willow Tree and all the people you delivered during the very early days, as visits to town were not so frequent in those days. I can remember that nothing was a trouble to you, and you'd put postal notes and letters for lottery tickets and deliver messages, even at time pay bills. Is there anything of this nature you would like to relate as being amusing or unusual?
Well, not so much amusing, but yes, I did. I just did it as part of the job. Yes. But some of them were a bit hard to get on with, but that didn't worry me much. I mean, they were stuck out there with no way of doing anything, and I didn't mind paying their bills or deliver their messages or buy whatever they wanted. But there was one old fellow at the time lived up Miller's Creek there, and he talked about stamping letters. And he said, "You're supposed to carry stamps." I said, "No, I'm not supposed to carry stamps at all." Well, he said, "How do the people in the bush get on then for posting their letters?" Well, I said, "If they haven't got a good obliging mailman, they're going to be uphill, aren't they?"
That's fair enough. Yes. Yes. And I suppose you would say that, it could be said anyway, that this spirit of service enabled you and your sons to enjoy the success you have achieved in doing business with the people of this district.
Oh, certainly, yes. As I said earlier there,
spirit of service.
The mail run was only a sidekick. Well, then it got better, and yes, it was because we had the mail that we did most everything else, but at the same time, most of them had no other way of doing it anyhow.
No.
But as the time went on and it come up into the war years in the 40s there, well, most of the men had later model cars and come to town more often, and the whole situation was becoming more motorised.
Yes.
But still, the roads weren't good, even up through Willow Tree. I remember the time when there was hardly any road through Willow Tree, and the first road through Willow Tree was only more or less of a track.
Yes.
And I remember a fellow named Bill Wiley, who started the business there with the baker shop and the Muse agency is today, had a fruit and vegetable shop. He had an old overland car cut down with a tray back on it.
Yes.
And he used to drive it over to the railway for his goods, cut a track over there through the black mud. He couldn't even turn it round. He used to come backwards through the same track. And he had fruit boxes from his front door out onto the road so the people could step out of their buggies or cars and walk in over the fruit boxes, stop walking in the mud. So that's how good the road through Willow Tree was.
And then when you were going to Crindai, you used to detour off the road, was that, the main road, was that corrugated? You'd go off on the side track up through Brayfield. I remember that as well as anything.
There was a better road up there through the sand than was on. Well, that's what I say. See, all the roads, there wasn't much else way they could do it.
No.
It was creek gravel, they were rough and stony.
Yes.
It was better to drive through the dirt than drive on the stones.
That's right, yes.
Still and all, in the wet weather, well, they were a means of getting there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that's just the way it was, wasn't it? Now, to turn to another branch of your business, you told us you pioneered stock transport. And what year did you say you started, or have you said what year you started transporting stock? And gradually it became the decline of the drovers who used to bring their stock into market?
They used to drive all the lambs and they still... I'd say that this district was one of the biggest and the best young sucker lambs producing districts in New South Wales. Well, at that time they all had sucker lambs, and they used to drive them in here. Well, old Bill Power and a couple more of those Warwick ones were the first ones that come and approached me about carting them by transport.
Yes.
So I gave it thought, and that's how I come to buy the first semi-trailer.
Yes.
And no brakes on the trailer or anything in those times, you know.
No.
So I've got a picture of it there. What I did, I just built a double-deck float on it, just ordinary sawn timber and wire netting.
Yes.
Well, it was all right for sucker lambs. I could cart them, no trouble at all. But then when they wanted me to cart big sheep and cart cattle, well, it was a different proposition altogether.
Yes.
I had to get steel floats made, and that's how we finished up in the finish. They were all steel, and well, it didn't matter then. We could cart any sort of stock or any sort of cattle, and some of them were pretty wild and rugged. I remember I even brought stock out of Barry station,
Yeah.
way over the other side of Hanging Rock. Yet you could load stock there and drive for an hour, and you could look straight down on the place you come from, up around those turns there. But I didn't like that very much because, as I say, there were no trailer brakes, and on the bad turns the outside wheel used to spin, you know, and I used to be afraid of breaking an axle because if I did, you'd never hold them go backwards.
No.
But I did it and got through with it all right until the times we got trailers with brakes on, and then it wasn't near as bad.
And what load would you have, and how many would you carry? Sheep?
Well, we could cart 2 trucks of sheep or 2 trucks of cattle in the finish. The trailers we finished up with were 18 foot by 8.
Yes.
Well, the stock trucks is 18 foot by 8.
That's right.
So our trailers, you see, were 36 foot long, so you could get 2 trucks of cattle or 2 trucks of sheep,
And when you
or a truck of cattle and a truck of sheep.
And when you very first start,
no.
you'd only take a truck.
No, when I first started, as I
something?
say, that trailer that I brought in then would only take 1 truck of stock.
Yes.
But then I had a Fargo bus chassis. The
Yes.
chassis was still up in the depot up there. Well, it had the longest tray of any of the tabletop trucks at the time, so I built a float on it. Well, you could cart 2 trucks in 3 loads on that one.
Yes.
So that helped a lot. It filled up a lot of the gap.
It would,
Yeah.
yes. And how many vehicles did you operate when you first started? Just the one, was it, or just
No, I had 2 other trucks when I brought the semi-trailer in, and that gave me a mail truck and 2 that I could put onto cart and sheep. But as I say, that tabletop run, well, it was only for lambs. You couldn't cart cattle or anything in that one, but it helped a lot.
Yes.
But then when in the 1940s, I started to get better trucks, and they were K7 and K6 internationals, and they were internationals right up to the finish. Last one we had was an International 180.
Yes.
I think you'll find up in Les's office now a photo of that truck with a load of windy wool on it.
Yes.
3 tiers of wool.
Yes.
Biggest loads of wool that you could be carting those times.
Yes. And how many vehicles do your sons use for stock transport today? Today's operations?
Well, the stock transport today finished as far as we were concerned with the loss of Ken.
Yes.
See, that was 2 bad knocks we got. See, Murray died in 1950 with polio, and then 10 years later in 1960, Ken died with leukemia.
Yes.
So we couldn't fill his place, and the other drivers you got weren't the best as far as stock was concerned, and none of them really knew how to handle them. So the stock part of the business and the general carrying part of it was sold to Reg Nowland.
Oh, I see. Oh, you don't operate now.
And Les then went out on his own with the bulk cartage, and he started there with it was a spin-off of the business we had, but he had a K6 Bedford tipping truck. Now, that's what he started with. There wasn't any time then before he bought himself a loader, and he bought an international truck then, and from then on he went, well, look where he is today. He's got about 30 odd of those great Kenworth semi-tipper trucks with 3 wheels. There's there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22 tyres on the road on each of those trucks alone. So what sort of tyre bills we got?
That's right. Yes, I wasn't aware that you was right out of that.
Yeah, we did.
Right out of stock.
Yeah, now the only thing we do today is now, and it's only done for more or less for most of the people that's on the mail, and particularly around the Brackbed area, we've got a smaller truck that I use for my horse transport, and that we cart a bit of wool to Newcastle for them because their sheds are not big enough. They can't hold big loads of wool, so it's handy for Bernie, and he runs the mail now, and he does most of the wool. As a matter of fact, he's in Newcastle today.
Bernie's been driving a few years. He got his licence at a pretty early age, I remember.
Oh, well, you see, that goes back when you mentioned Bernie. Bernie got a special licence when he was only 15.
That's what I thought,
They run the mail in a ton Chev truck that we had.
I can remember that.
Bernie, and he's a good driver too.
Yeah.
But I think if you have to compare drivers and say who was the best drivers, I think it might be Ken.
Yes.
He could put a semi-trailer nearly anywhere. Yes.
And there would be many deadlines to meet in your business over the years, so I suppose vehicle maintenance would be of constant concern.
Oh, it was. I've worked all night and all day sometimes to get them Particularly, as many times I've had to work all night on them to get them ready to go the next day,
Yes.
and do most of it on my own. Well,
Yeah.
I never learned anything as far as mechanical work concerned. You had to teach yourself, but
Yeah.
that was one thing about Alfred Bernard. He was very handy as far as mechanical. You know,
Yeah.
he was good that way.
Yes.
Yeah, and don't worry, me and him put many nights in
Yes.
getting them ready.
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
gee,
yeah,
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the longest trip you ever made with livestock?
Oh, well, I'd say probably from around this district of Flemington, that we did do several trips there when there was rail strikes or
Yeah,
something or other.
yeah,
As far
yeah.
as truck was concerned, you had
Yeah.
to get a special transport permit to do it, but
Yeah.
we did it, yes, well, and I'd say that probably they were the
Yeah.
longest ones, but still, in the later years then, particularly for old Bill McGuinness, when he was at Eastview there at Crindle, I did a lot of work for him. Well, he was a dealer.
Yeah.
Well, many times we carted stock, particularly mostly cattle, from way up in Queensland to Crindle for Bill McGuinness.
Yes.
So I'd say that those were, probably the longest ones.
Yes. And then from the, when, I think you might have mentioned earlier when you commenced transporting school children, that was after
Well, you
that.
see, no, as I said, Cecil Carter Stander, it
That's
was
right, I
in
remember.
1948 when they closed the country schools,
Yes.
decided to bring them all to town, which
Yes.
was a good idea.
Yes.
But yes, he was the one that started it, but I came into it in 1950.
Yes.
Well then, as the time went on, I got other runs too. I got the Collie run and the Wallaby Dower run, and then eventually the Murrurundi Crindai one.
Yeah.
Well now, as I say, Ponce and Kathy, they run it now, and they've got, there's 22 or 23 buses, I think, and he does a lot of special trips now. He's been all around the country, I think. Well, he did one not long ago, way up into the Northern Territory,
That's
around about there. I think there were a lot of Murrurundi
That's
people
right,
on that
yeah,
too.
yeah.
And then besides that, he's bought out Kel Thompson's in Musselbrook.
Yeah.
They got school runs down there now.
Yes.
Kel, as a matter of fact, still drives for him.
Yes. And how did this work compare with the mail run and livestock transporting children? It had to be much a different thing altogether, wouldn't it?
Well,
Different
we
responsibility.
combined it all the time because
Yeah.
there were only school runs at that time. You run the school bus.
Yeah.
Well, for weeks and weeks there, I run this primary school bus to this school here and did the mail at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did that for a long time.
And you actually transported the Jacks Creek schoolroom in?
I did.
Into
right there.
Willow Tree,
Over
didn't you?
that somewhere was crossing the bridge down here.
Yes.
They had to do something special down there to get it across the bridge.
Yes.
I think we jacked it up or
That's
something.
what I thought. Yeah, you'd
We
have
jacked
to.
it up.
You'd have to do that, and
Yeah, but we got it here. It's one of the
yeah,
school
that's
rooms.
right.
Yes, it's there at
Yeah,
the
that's
school
the
today.
school I went to. And are children generally well behaved on school buses, or is that a problem? What keeping the peace, sort of thing,
Well,
controlling them?
yes, it is a problem because it doesn't matter how you go about it. When you can't blame them. I mean, if you look at it this way, you can't expect kids to sit there all the time and just do nothing. But
No.
I used to go pretty well with them, and they knew how far they could go with me, and I put a limit on it, and when they got over that, they wouldn't stand any fighting on the bus or that sort of thing at all. That was right out as far as I was concerned. I remember two fellas were at it all the time. They were always fighting, so on the finish up one day, I stopped the bus and let them off. I said, right, I've had you fellas, get out here until I see who is the best, and then whoever wins, I'll give him a hiding then. So, that's what I did, but you couldn't get much cooperation from the parents sometimes. They were hard to get on with. Well, I drove that Crindai, that high school bus for 15 years to Crindai High School.
Yeah.
I could tell you some tales there.
Yes.
People say, why don't you write a book? Well, I'll tell you what. You'd stand your hair up a bit if I did.
Yeah.
My God, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I've been in some sessions there, have I?
Yeah. And after all that, do you think children should be caned at school these days?
No, I don't.
You
I've
don't?
been against, no, I don't. I'm against that because they'll resent it.
Yeah.
Now, I know the little bit of schooling that I had, as I say, any time that I run into trouble like that and got a belting, it didn't do me any good at all.
Yeah.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
And through the experiences that I've had with kids, and I've had a lot of experience with them, and I consider that I can, you know, at that time anyhow, I could do more by talking to kids and explaining what they ought to do and what they oughtn't to do than any of those teachers could at the time, because I had a lot of kids that were in trouble all the time, you know, and they were playing up. I remember one fellow, he was always walking around and not doing anything really harmful on the bus, but he was always in some sort of mischief. So I chipped him one day and I said, look, for God's sake, can't you sit down for a while and be quiet and stop walking about? I said, look, I'll finish up putting you off the bus if you don't behave yourself. He said, Mr. Howard, what a dreary, boring trip it'd be without me.
There you are. Yes, well, that's a funny thing. I did a similar interview with Mrs. Bladen at Blandford, and I asked her the same question. But she'd also read a big family, and she thought they should be kind. So,
well,
so I don't know what...
well, perhaps in extreme circumstances, but not the general, no.
I'm inclined to agree with the way you reason it out.
No, well, as I say, I took a lot of nice kids and I took a lot of real mischief makers there at the time, and I've had a lot of other experiences that mightn't do to relate over tape recorder, but I'll tell you some of them if you want me to, but anyhow.
That'll leave it aside. We might, thanks.
Yeah, but no, I used to explain to them too and tell them that their behaviour on the bus meant a lot to their life when they left school.
That's right.
If they behaved themselves on the bus, there was often times that I could help them when they did leave school, right. And I did. You'd be surprised at how many people, business people, had come to me and say, well, now look, we're going to put so-and-so many school leavers on here now, and so-and-so has applied for a job here. Now, did you take them to school, or what you could tell me about he or her or whoever it was? Well, I can tell you there's a lot of boys and girls got jobs today that I give that little push to, that they don't know about.
You gave them a good private reference sort of thing. Yes. Now, leaving that, Rafe, apart from your carrying business, I know you'd have had a lifelong interest and love of horses, not just your pack horses. Would you like to talk about some of the good ones that have been through your hands?
Well, yes, there's well, let that look there, there's pages of them.
Yes.
Well, I've got about 28 registered mares now, and I'm a member of the Australian Stock Horse Association, the Australian Saddle Pony Association, and the Crindine District Equitation District Club. And I've had horses that have competed well in all of them, but my time with being able to go to shows with horses was very restricted, because I nearly always had transport trucks or buses or something like this to attend to at the time, so most of the main things that's been done with my horses have been done by somebody else. Well, I still own them, of course. I've got 7 stallions. And they're different, they're all over the place at this time, but a black horse that I call Abby's Mark. Now, he was a beautiful horse, and there were some people named Coben had him at Goulburn. Well, he won a lot of ribbons, a lot of lead classes, a lot of ridden classes, and 2 drafts. He was Boxhurst Abby's Mark, but he was N&P Coburn's Boxhurst Abby's Mark. Well, then old Jericho, the old Joshua Jericho, nearly won the state championships at Canberra. He was Boxhurst Jericho, but he was Cobra Stud's Boxhurst Jericho. Well, then the same thing with John Wright. He had won 2. Well, he was Boxhurst. What was old Jerry? He had Boxhurst Jericho, but he was John Wright's Boxhurst Jericho. Well, now Eve Thompson and Ross Thompson out here at Kickable, they've got a mob of my horses out there. Got a little stallion she calls Tyson. She's thinking the sun only comes out to shine on him. But she's done a mighty job with him. He's even competed at Sydney Show with some pretty good results, and he's been supreme exhibit at quite a lot of shows and stock horse places and that. And he's Boxhurst Tyson, but he's E.W. Thompson's Boxhurst Tyson. So that's the way it's been. But yes, I did. I've got several blankets in there made of the ones that I won myself, and I competed very successfully with all the shows that I did do. I mostly with hunters and hacks and lead classes that I had, but I did have a few pretty good camp horses. But as far as the stock horse is concerned, well, I was lucky enough to have the last two Radium stallions.
Yes.
Well, I've still got the last genuine grandson of Radium today,
Yes.
and he's a mighty horse. Well, then I've got a lot of mares and horses with the Radium blood still right up in them. And there's people now trying to, they're asking me for my mares to breed foals out of. So it gives me a bit of a kick,
That would too,
I'm
yes.
pleased with that, and I've got a chestnut horse in the yard down there now. I just went down and fed him there just before you come. Got 5 crosses of Radium and 6 crosses of Medlow in him.
Has he? Yes.
So I've still got
Yeah.
far too many, 60 odd I think.
Yes. And now, do you get down to Sydney Show very often as a spectator, Ron?
Not very often, but I have been there, and I've had horses that have competed pretty successfully too in Sydney shows years ago. I'll tell you, Frank Maynard years ago that used to.
I remember.
Yeah, and he used to break in horses about, and he had 2 or 3 of mine. He reckoned, well, poor old Paddy Colour, the late Paddy. I had a lot of time, and I did a lot with poor old Paddy.
Yes.
I thought a lot of Paddy, and a horse called Glenn. Well, Paddy Colour finished up with Glenn, and I was very pleased to hear Hunt, what's his name? At Paddy's funeral.
Brian Hunt, yes.
Brian Hunt. Remember Glenn and Play. Well, they were both my horses.
Yes.
That Paddy Colour I did a lot with. As a matter of fact, I've got a picture there. I'll show you before you go.
Yes.
Paddy Colour on old Play, just up at the radio here at Willow Tree.
Yes.
But yes, I had, well that was one of the things that I'd say that probably you might say been the biggest disappointment of my life, because I've always had horses that could have been at the top all the time,
Yes.
but I never had time to go with them.
No. And how about holidays in general through your life?
Never had all down my life, don't know what it's like.
You don't know what a holiday's like?
I've had a few breaks, but you wouldn't call holidays.
Okay.
I remember once I went to South Australia there to a fellow named Arch Leggett, who worked at St Elmo with me when I was there, and I went down there for a fortnight with him. Well, I suppose you might have called that a holiday, but there's different times I've been. Well, Rita and Peter Whitbread, they live at Burke.
Yes.
I've been out there for a few weeks with them, so I've had a few breaks that way,
Yeah.
as far as that goes, but
You've never...
nothing that you might call a holiday.
No. You wouldn't be worried about what time, knocking off at a certain time in the day.
Oh, geez, look, when
You finished when you had nothing else
When
that you could do.
when that 40-hour week first came in, somebody said to me, "How are you going to get on with this 40-hour week?" I said, "I can work it in 2 or 3 days, and often do."
Yeah. That's
You
right.
know, this restriction of working hours and unions and all this sort of thing, I reckon that's what's got Australia in the trouble it's in today. They're still running the country.
What do you think about the daylight saving? That wouldn't have...
Didn't worry me Didn't worry me at all, because I went all day anyhow, so as a matter of fact it was better for me. I got a bit more done in the afternoon.
Yeah.
No, it didn't worry me.
Yes, that'd be a bit, I was sort of a bit hard on the school children.
Well, they used to complain about it, but when I had that bus there, and I used to run right out to the end of Berwick Lanes, I had the Mick Perkins young fellas and Hamilton Smith's kids and 2 or 3 lots there. Well, they didn't let them, they'd fly out of the bus, and if their parents weren't there to meet them, they'd just start running, race down the road, so it didn't worry them.
No. Well, probably people right out there used to getting up early, and I suppose, but still, I thought, there probably would be problems with...
Sometimes I'd say, yes, there would be kids that would affect, but it certainly didn't affect them, and they had the longer way to come.
Yes, that's right.
Even Brian Cogdrop's fellas, I brought them to school too.
Yes. And in general, what do you think of roads and highways today?
Well, I think I might have to say that New South Wales got the worst roads I've been on anywhere, and I've been in Queensland, been in South Australia, and been in Victoria.
Yes.
Well, I'd say that some of the main highways here are starting to improve, and they're certainly a lot better.
Yeah.
See, in the war years, I mentioned back there a while back that there was a shortage of trucks and that, so we carted a fair lot of wool and stock and that to Newcastle, and occasionally to Sydney. Well, even then the roads weren't any good, and only now in this last few weeks I've heard member George Soares is taken up the main thing about the New England highway.
Yes.
And it is bad all the way.
It is,
You can travel it all the way,
Yes.
and no, God, it's not good.
The Pacific Highway's worse, isn't it?
I was just going to say the Pacific Highway seems to be worse,
Yes.
but I think a lot of the accidents on that Pacific Highway could be avoided, you know. I think, you see, you must realise, they talk about speed limits. Well, there again, I'm up against that a bit too, because speed limits, yes, there should be speed limits, but different limits for different patches of highway, you know.
Yes.
It doesn't not apply the same thing all the way,
All the
because
way
you couldn't
through.
do it anyhow.
No.
And I lean a little bit to the semi-trailer drivers in this sense that I'm very opposed to that drug taking or pills to keep you awake. I've always been against that.
Yes.
And a lot of the fellows that put in those semi-trailers probably haven't had enough experience to drive semi-trailers, but they're good drivers all the same.
Yes.
But the trouble is, they put in the trailer there with a load of stuff to be delivered there in a certain time. Well, I don't care how good a driver you are, you couldn't do it
No.
under the road conditions and the traffic conditions
That's right.
today. And I think that possibly that does, I wouldn't say cause all the accidents, but by dear, it causes some of them.
Yes.
And I am opposed to bus. I think there should be a speed limit there, because there's lives at stake there.
Yes.
And I think, yes, there should be a speed limit. And
Yes.
I've instilled that into our fellows too, and I still do, until these driver fellows will just hold your foot up a bit,
Yes.
because the buses and trucks today, heavens above, if they're on a good stretch of road and they really want to go, you've got to do about 130, 40 kms to keep with them or stay in front of them.
That's right. Yes, well, do you think that there's any hope for improvement in the situation, or do you think we're just going to battle along the way we've been going the last few years for some years to come?
Well, I don't know. It's a hard thing to comment on, because there's a lot of things. I wouldn't like to be in government and trying to govern the country in any party.
No, I wouldn't do it.
I don't agree with the way the country's been sold to the Japanese. I think that's right out. That shouldn't be. And apparently this Hawke Keating government, that's what they're doing, and they're looking for money. Well, in the long run, I think it'll rebound. You know, I do, and. Then the way that most things are going, so there's too many people getting too much money to do nothing, and that's what's I think one of the main things that's ruined the railway.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that here. I had so much to do with the railway that, even back in those years that all that loading was done here at Willow Tree.
Yes.
There was a lot of overseers, or whatever you like to call them, come there and just walk about and do nothing. Well, what's going on there? And that applies to nearly every thing of that sort. The places in Sydney, the production departments and different things, different places where our buses are built, for instance, all those. Look, I'd like to take you into some of those factories that we've got to took down the lake down there, and God, look, there's about 2 or 3 fellows working and about 5 or 6 looking on. And half of them couldn't even talk to you.
No.
I said to one of the overseers and foreman of the press metal motor works one day, I said, your workforce was letting you down. He said, yes, I know you do. Well, I said, why don't you shut them out the door? He said, if I could only shut half of them out the door, he said, it pleased me very much, but if I did that, he said, the whole thing's on strike.
Yeah.
Well, now, that's what I mean. That's why this country is in the state that it's in today. And until they get us on top of these unions and straighten them out and come to them in some sort of an industrial peacemaking, or whatever you like to call it, between the workers and the employers, and particularly the places that depend on export, because they've priced themselves out of the world markets in a lot of places.
Yes,
And another thing that I'm very opposed to, and have been all the time, is the sale of our merino rams overseas.
Yes.
That should not be allowed under any circumstances. I'm right against that,
yes.
because you'll find in a few years' time they'll be producing all as good a merino wool over there as we are here, and that is one of the things that has stuck to Australia all these years. They could produce the best fine wool in the world.
Yes.
And they still could, but if they're going to start exporting their good rams, well, I wouldn't know what sort of a reaction that's going to make. Can't be good as far as I'm concerned.
And how much would does a modern bus cost today to buy, put on the road?
Well, in 1932, I bought two Leyland buses for $35,000 each for just the ordinary school, seats and that.
Yes.
Well, now those same buses today, with the same seats in them, and not improved very much otherwise, are $120,000.
Yes.
And there again, you come back to the union. Now, nearly every time you went to the press metal, and I did a lot of business with them, they'd say, well, now look, you ought to take one of these buses in build now, because the next lot that we build, there's been a wage improvement. They're going to be up so many $1,000s the next lot. Now that happened quite a lot of times.
Every time,
Yeah,
I reckon.
yeah.
You'd want to buy a new
So
bus.
that's as far as I'm concerned, why this country's in the state it's in, and it is in a hell of a state, there's no doubt about that. But I can't see this awful over it. You see, the trouble is I don't argue politics at all, but no, you don't talk about Bob Hawke, so it's not the man so much, but it's the principle. Now, when he was the AC2 president, he was the fellow that started all this wage business, this high wage business, and he went into politics with the express purpose of being Prime Minister. He just walked over the top of Bill Hayden to get the top job there, and well, of course he was elected Prime Minister. Well, Malcolm Fraser, I did have a lot of time for him, and I thought he was going to do some good, but there again, see, the unions beat him. But I've been told since, I don't know whether it's right or not, but I read it in a little book that a certain paper gave me, that he was Fabian. So if that's right, I suppose that's one of the reasons why he didn't do as well as he should have.
Yes. Do you think, getting back onto transport, heavy transport again, do you think they're going to get any bigger or better than they are today, or do you think they've just about reached
I wouldn't say that they can't get better, because they're improving and experimenting with different things all the time.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say they couldn't get better, but God, I don't know about them getting much bigger. I think they're plenty big enough.
They can't get any wider because the roads are not wide enough now, are
I think
they?
they're plenty big enough. Well, look at these great things that Les has got up here. Good heavens above. Gosh, strength mighty, they're huge things.
Yes.
And no, I don't think they could get much bigger, but I wouldn't say that they can't get better in some way. Well, I think too the means of fuel, they've got to do something about that. Just how they're going to do it, I don't know, but at the present day prices of petrol, well, that's, it's getting a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes. And what do you think you'd probably, how do you, what's your thoughts on, I read the other day where, first of all, to bring down the pollution problem, they say that they should concentrate on putting more heavy stuff back on the rail line again.
Well, yes, I think
take it off the road.
I think there's good logic in that, because I think the railways should be kept running, but see, they've got to be viable.
Yes.
And this is, as I said earlier, one of the problems with the high wage thing.
Yes.
Now, I could relate to your problems now right here at Willow Tree. That XPT, when they first started it, used to break down pretty often.
Yes.
And nobody could do anything with it because it was all computerised, or whatever you like to call it. Nobody could fix it. So it pulled up here at the Willow Tree railway station. They couldn't get it forward and they couldn't get it back. So buses, straight away.
Yes.
See, well, we had a job to get there, but we got there.
Yes.
And the real panic with the station master and employees there. But there was 18 railway employees in the traffic part of it, to transport the rail outside, stood on the end of the railway there in a group, and they never, not one of them, offered a hand to help get those people transferred from train to buses or their luggage or anything else, because the unions wouldn't let them. Now, I think that's what I say about these unions now. That's just bloody ridiculous. Now, the superintendent from Werris Creek was there at the time this was going on, and I happened to talk to him there for a while. And anyhow, we got it all sorted out and got the people on, but they were poor old people, they real just lost. They didn't know
Yes.
where they were.
That's right.
Well, you had to try and say to them and do the best you could to get them onto the buses they were supposed to be,
Yeah.
because the buses were going everywhere,
Yeah.
some to Sydney and some to North, and that's the way that was. Anyhow, I was pleased then after we did get it all sorted out, I got a letter from this this director or area director from Werris Creek to thank me for the way we'd assisted in then transshipping that particular train.
Yes.
So you see, that's just one instance. Well, that goes on all the time.
Yes.
All the
Yes.
time.
Now, we're getting on towards the end of it. There's a bit of room left on the tape yet. Raph, is there anything else you'd like to talk about your life, or anything that you'd like to have done, or if you had your time over again, you might have done something different to what you did? I suppose we could
Not
also...
really. I do most of the things that I've done this over again. I didn't. It didn't worry me very much because it didn't really, concern me all that much about being on my own.
No.
I'm here now. Say, unfortunately, my wife's in that nursing home in Corinda, and I'm here by myself. But yes, it gets a bit lonely sometimes, but it doesn't get me down. But look, as I say, I grew up at Glaston, and I could see that things were going wrong there. So I used to go out when I was only 15. I'd be camped out in a tent, trapping rabbits and shooting foxes and that sort of thing. And I was making more money doing that than they were making off the property.
Yes.
The way they were running it.
Yes.
So there's things like that, yes, and I think back over them, but there are some things, yes, that I do a little bit different, but most of all what I've done, I'd do over again, because I've always had horses, and I've always, I was always mechanically interested, and, it was really something when I came in with old Fred Bernard here, and we did what we did here, and it gives me a sense of what I'd say, achievement to look at the fleet of trucks and where Les has got the haulage business and the way Poncie and Cathy's got the buses.
That's right.
See, it's when you look back over that, well, it makes you rather pleased that you've achieved something,
That's
because
right.
I started it all.
That's right, and you've lived and with good health long enough to enjoy it, not doing something.
Dr. Barton at Scone said to me, he said, for a fellow your age, you're unique in a way, because he said, you got a blood pressure better than I've got, and it's better than a lot of fellows a lot younger than you have. I put it down to the fact, he said, that you're always active, you don't drink and you don't smoke, particularly that you don't smoke, so there you are. I don't know.
You've never smoked in your life, right?
Oh, when I wasn't supposed to. I remember when I was a kid at Glaston there, a fellow named old Sid Manning had that.
I remember Sid, yes.
Yeah, those old tins of caps and cigarettes. Give me a cigarette, and I used to smoke them or try, do a lot of coughing, but one day he brought a little cigar down and he cut it in half and gave me half. Oh God, I'll tell you what, that finished me smoking. Oh my God, was I sick.
Yes.
Oh dear. No more cigars anyhow. No, I didn't worry me much. I never really had time, but as far as the grog part of it was concerned, well, as I say, I grew up with it and I saw what it can do. Well, here I've got it in my own family. It's certainly done nothing for Bernie. And hasn't helped him in any way, and I've got no time for that at all. But it's not that I'm not any wise or anything like that. I go and have a drink with a person, I did. But the reason that you don't see in me in hotels and anything, you'd go in and have a drink with somebody, to be sociable, that you only wanted one drink, then you'd offend somebody else because you wouldn't have a drink with them.
That's right.
So that's why I give up. There was one particular instance, I won't mention name, but we did mention him in the course of that tape there. He was in there one day, half full, so he buys a drink and puts it down in front of me. And I said, no, I don't want it. I come in here to have a drink with whoever it was, and I said, I don't want another one. Oh, well, he said, you'll have to drink that one now. I said, no, I won't have to drink it at all. You drink it. I said, you bought it, you drink it. No, he said, I bought it, he said, for you, he said, and you're going to drink it. So he started to get a bit nasty. So I just got the beer and I poured the bloody thing into the thing, and holy ghost did he hit the roof. I said, well, I told you I didn't want it and I don't want it. And I said, come in to have one drink and that's it. And I said, I'll tell you something else. I said, you will never see me in a bar again. Well, the next day he came back, and he said, oh, geez, he said, I think you overdid it yesterday a bit about that beer. No, I said, I didn't overdo it at all. You did. I said, I told you I didn't want it. When I say no, I mean no, and that's it.
Yes.
So that was the end of that session.
Talking about, there's a little bit of tape to run yet. Getting back, you mentioned was it Sid Manning, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, old Sid, yes. He used to work out. Who did he work for?
Yeah, he worked for my grandfather, but see, poor old Sid was a state ward, you know.
Oh, yes.
I remember I was only a bit of a kid, you know, pretty young at the time, when he first came to Glaston.
Yes.
So he worked with grandfather and you know, different ones about there, and after grandfather, after Glaston was sold, he was with McDonald's Creek people, Sills and Martins and, you know, up there, and yeah, poor old Sid, and he come in here and, you know, he lived up home. We used to give him a feed and whatever, you know, but poor old Sid, I had a lot of time for him, and when he died, poor old fellow, I'd have went to his funeral if I'd have known, you know, and even Tom Hall, now, he was there at Glaston on and off with Tom Hall after a while. And old Tom said to me, poor old Sid man, and he said, look, he said, I'd have went to his funeral if I'd have known. So, you see, people do have feeling.
They do. And then another fellow was Cocky Redmond. You remember Cocky Redmond?
Yeah, I remember him. Poor old Cocky, he was out here in Willow Creek camped in a little hut across there, you know, and of course he was another fellow with a lot of ability that was beaten by grog. And he used to give me money to bring grog out to him, and he'd ask me to get him a bottle of rum, and I wouldn't buy it. I used to buy him bottles of beer and get him a bottle of good wine or something like that for his money. And I had him going pretty well, and he said to me, you know, he said, I feel pretty good, he said, since I've knocked off that hard stuff. And anyhow, there was another fellow here named Graham. I went out there cutting mintweed. The old Graham was a booze artist too, so he takes a load of grog out. Well, that was the end of poor old Cocky Redmond. He was back on the grog again, see? Although this old Graham fellow was there, but I feel sorry for him too. He died on his own there, you know. He was just found dead in the hut there one day. So, you know, it makes me feel, I feel down on people like that. You know, it's a terrible thing. I think that whoever they are, I often, you know, I respect everybody's life, you know, and I never like to, I don't rubbish anyone, you know, don't speak ill of anybody. I mean, if anyone's down at all, well, it's their business.
That's right.
I don't criticise them, or if I can help them at all, or talk them out of it, or do anything, and by God, I tell you what, I've helped a lot of kids, by gee, I have. By crups, I have. So I tell you, some of those stories I could tell you about that kid in high school.
better left unsaid, eh? Remember Florrie Hills? I was a kid going to school and we used to be a bit frightened. She used to walk in from those creeks.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Old lady?
The bloody old lady reminds me, you would have seen her. She walks on the highway. She's a hell of a lot on the highway. I call her the highway lady. I picked her up and give her a lift 2 or 3 times.
Where's this?
She walks on the highway. She's often here in town.
Oh.
I don't know who she is.
Nowadays.
I picked her up one day and took her to Scone, and she told me that when I said, where are you when you're home? She said, Armadale. But, God almighty, what she's a real bloody tramp she is. Oh, God, dear.
And then there was another old character, George Spinks. He used to have a creamy horse.
Yeah, she was bred at Glaston. I finished up with that old mare.
Did you?
Yeah, I bred a couple of foals out of her. My father bred her. That's creamy mare. Yeah, I remember old George. Well, there was another poor old fellow, see, no education, and nothing else to do with grog. Well, what's their life worth?
And what did he actually do out there? I can only remember
he was a good bushman.
He worked on one of the properties out there.
Oh, ring barking and sucking and fencing and all that sort of hard work. You know, and work his guts out and then come in here and blow it all up at the pub. Well, what's their life worth? You know? I feel sorry for those people. Oh, I do. When time comes and they get old, well, that's what I say now. As mum's in that nursing home, and dear, oh dear, when you go up there now and look at those people in there, it's shocking. Well, one old fellow died this morning. He come from Murrurundi, old Len Gill.
Did he?
Yeah. Well, now, that's the way to go, though. Now, yesterday, poor old fellow, he walks around the place, you know, and he'll screw the top off the pepper and salt shakers and spill them all out. Well, yesterday, he was doing that, so I said, have another bit of a yarn to him. And he'll talk to you, you know, in patches. Some days he'll talk real good. Screwed the tops on, and I said, don't screw them off, Lynn. So he started to walk around a bit, and I said, look, sit down here, Len, your tea will be here directly. So I sat him down in his chair and had a bit of a yarn to him. And Claire rang me this morning there, she goes and gives Mum a breakfast. And she said they got him out of bed and sat him in the chair to give him his breakfast, and then they tapped him on the shoulder to have his breakfast, he was dead, sitting in the chair. Well, I'm pleased in one way. It gave me a bit of a shake up there, I'll tell you this morning, I did. And, but when that time comes, it's, you know, that's the way to go.
It is the way to go. Better than suffering, isn't it?
Yeah, poor old Len, that's it. Well, this afternoon then there's a Jack Perry. Do you know Jack Perry? He's one of the old residents. I've known him for years.
He comes from out of Pringdye.
Oh,
his brother was a dentist or
that's
some
right, yeah,
a relative
yeah.
dentist,
And, yes, well, I was Joe years ago. As a matter of fact, down that Cap Creek, on that house that's up there, I carted that up there in a section for old Joe Perry, their father.
Yes.
And, you know, I did a work for them, so I'll try and go to that service. 2:30 it is.
Yes.
I'll see if I can get up there for that.
Yes. Yeah, but what, generally speaking, that there's better facilities for, you know, elderly people now than there was in the early days.
There certainly is, oh yes. Yeah. Well, I've had people say to me, oh, I don't know, you can go up into that home, oh, I couldn't go there. Well, if that home wasn't there, where would they go? Well, what would you do with them? I consider that Grindai is one of the best towns as far as health services, and I know because they've got a lovely hospital, and then that Milpara, well, the people in there are worse than the ones in the home. They are the ones that's real mental,
that's right.
You know, that's a terrible thing, but still if Milpara wasn't there, what would you do with them?
No, that's right.
You know?
No,
I've got a lot of time for that nursing home, and I'll tell you this, those girls there, they do a mighty job. The patience they've got with them, you know.
Yes, that's right.
Oh dear, it's really, it's unreal.
Yes.
It is?
No, I think they've advanced a lot in that sort of thing because I know when I was a kid, there was really nothing.
Nothing. No, nothing.
But in those days, of course, people didn't live as long, Rafe, did they?
Well, no.
And back in the pre-Second World War, they didn't have the means of keeping us alive. So,
well, no, possibly they're not either.
But nowadays, it's. I think in most places like.
Yes, well, I suppose there's something in that too. But then, in the same thing as far as I'm personally concerned, well, I do pretty much the same now as I did, and eat the same and do the same as I did years ago.
That's right.
It hasn't had much of an effect for me. Well, Barbara McNamara comes down here every Wednesday and cleans the place up and does me washing and that and cooks a heap of dinners there and puts them in the fridge there one on top of the other. You can see them in there now. I don't eat big feeds, I can't. No. Sometimes I go all day and I don't have anything to eat at all and it doesn't worry me a bit.
Yes, well that's probably standing you in good stead anyway.
Yes, well, as I say, I haven't got myself kidded at all in any way. I know I'm damn lucky. But people will say to me, how do you do it? Well, I don't know how you do it, but I'll do it as long as I can. That's how I'll do. I'll still muck around with horses down here, and I still am. I've got this fellow in the yard down here now, and he's an arrogant bugger too.
Well, that's very good, Rafe, and I think we might have that. Is anything else special you want to talk about?
Well, not really. I think you know you've covered most of it there. There are instances, of course, they were all the way through that, you know, but you've covered most of it, and you've got most of the details of what's been done as far as history is concerned.
That's right.
Here, as far as you know, progress in roads and bridges and that. So you see the bridges over all the creeks that there weren't there then.
That's right.
And the conditions today would be the same as they were there if those bridges and roads weren't there. The people would have no way of getting in. By the time they'd be you know.
Absolutely stranded, modern transport, wouldn't they?
Some of them around Blackville are now.
Yes.
Yeah, but still, where they manage, now you see it's a pity there, as you mentioned Blackville, beautiful crops of sorghum and sunflower there are more or less underwater, you know, and around Breezer there. Well, Stuart Clift from out here at Emeroo, he's one of the Clifts from Breezer, and he's still got country there. Now he had a good crop of sunflowers. So to try and get them off, he put the header into it, but he put one of those great big versatile tractors behind the header to push it, and he got them off. That's how he did it. But he was cutting the track a foot deep or more, you know, all the time. They got them all. And now, see, Muckay Springs did the same thing. They had sorghum, tried to strip it, put the header into it, blew it up. Well, now, if they'd have got the sorghum off, see, it wouldn't have paid for the damage they've done to the header.
No.
So it's no good to try and do it that way.
No.
Now, those are the problems that the farmers are up against today.
Yes.
You know, and those are the things they've got to try and sort out.
Yes.
Well, see, Stuart Clift, as I say, had one of the Breezer Clifts, and he was able to have had the facilities to take it all.
Yes.
You see, well, the ordinary farmer hasn't got that.
No.
Okay, and see, the fellas that rely on crops and that today are in a very bad way because of the wet season has been. But if they can hang on when this weather does take up, if it does bloody take up, they're going to reap the benefit later on because it'll be a mighty spring. And
It will be, yes, it'll be a good spring.
you know, everything will be in good condition. So what they can sow now, if they can keep it till next year, they'll certainly get some crops then.
You'd never imagine that they would have been able to farm even at Racown where I used to work, or Talawanta as they call it today.